What is up, YouTube? Kolst here, and we are back with the, what is this, the 9th review for the new set, Festival of Legends, coming out on April 11th. This will be a very exciting time for Arena, surely. So let's just talk about all the new cards. This set is for, this review is for Shaman, so we have Melomania. This is a 0-mana spell, epic card, so you won't see it too much in Arena. Each time you play a minion this turn, add a random Shaman spell to your hand. I mean, this card is never bad. It's play, you can't summon, so you can't like use this with hero powers or stuff, but there's a lot of things you can do with this. You play Schooling, that adds 3/1/1 rushes to your hand that buff each other. Turn 3, you play all the fish, and you just play this, and it's 3 random Shaman spells. Pretty good, right? Pretty much impossible. I mean, the only time this card is ever going to be really bad, I mean, I guess you might get terrible spells, but like pretty much the only time it's ever going to be bad is when you have no cards in hand and you top deck this. Otherwise, I mean, you can always just get this. You'll get like multiple spells always, basically, right? It's good, right? It always replaces itself. It costs 0 mana, so it's kind of crazy that it costs 0 mana. Yeah, it just seems pretty darn strong. When I play it, I get a bunch of terrible spells. When my opponent plays it, they get legendaries. They get like the 7 mana spell, which we'll talk about later. But yeah, it's definitely very, very good most of the time, right? Just not 100% guaranteed because it's random, but usually should be good. Spells are usually good. Next up, we have a card which is less good. Saxophone Soloist. This is a 1-mana 1/2 Murloc. Battlecry. If you control no other minions, add a Saxophone Soloist to your hand. This is a kind of a weird one because it's like a Firefly, but it's not always a Firefly. Sometimes it's just a 1/2. You can potentially get more of them, right? Which is nice. If you actually have Murloc synergy, you can just guarantee you're always going to have Murloc synergy. A lot of the time it's just going to be a Firefly, and sometimes it's going to be worse than a Firefly. And I feel like, practically speaking, it's never really going to be meaningfully better. So I don't think it's great. It's not, I guess it's not terrible, because enough of the time it's probably going to be a Firefly. You can activate your Melomania and stuff, so it has just, you know, Firefly is a good card, right? Even nowadays, but I mean, it's also like a 6-year-old card, but yeah, so I think it's not great. It's just, yeah. As mentioned, yeah, it's like you ever hero power and then you just can't trigger this anymore. It's a little weird. But yeah, so I don't think it's great, but it's an okay. Sometimes it's an okay one drop. Next up, we have Flowrider. 2 mana 3/2 Naga Battlecry. If you're overloaded, discover a spell from your deck. This is like kind of like that mage one, the spell coiler, I guess. Gonna be one that you probably don't want to tempo because you're gonna want to get a spell from your deck a lot of the time. Sometimes you might tempo it, but you would very much prefer not to. There are some of these overload cards here that are requiring this overload synergy. The thing is that I don't like overload. I don't like picking overload very much, but there are some overload cards that you will take here for sure. And if you get a 2-mana 3/2 that discovers a spell from your deck, that's very, very good, basically, because that's better than drawing a card. And a 2-mana 3/2 on top of just makes it pretty nice. But yeah, it does require the overload condition to actually be good, which makes it a bit unreliable because you're probably still just not going to have that many overload cards. You know, usually it should be solid, at least on average. It's just one of those things that's going to be much better in some decks than others due to just reliability being able to trigger it and quality of your spells too. Next up, we have Chill Vibes. 3 mana frost spell, common. Restore 8 health. With Finale, summon a 3/3 elemental with taunt. So I mean, on curve, it's not unplayable, right? Even if you're not really healing, hey, you get a 3/3 with taunt. It's okay, right? It's not great. You can restore anything you want, so you can heal up a minion too. The Finale probably most of the time won't be that hard to trigger. There's the risk that later on you might not be able to trigger it, and then it's just a frozen touch, and then it's, you know, not really worth a slot in your deck. But it's never that bad, because I mean, usually it's a 3/3 elemental with taunt, and then the heal is just kind of gravy, you know? If you're a defensive deck, you get that 8 healing and a 3/3 taunt. That's nice. You wouldn't take it in an aggressive tempo deck, but I mean, slower decks should like this, I think. Finale requires you to do it at the end of your turn, and this is a weird one because like this doesn't have any drawback You always will trigger the finale on this if you have the ability to. I guess the one thing is you can't use multiple of them and get multiple finales at the same time. But there's no drawback to this one, right? The only condition on the finale is whether or not you're actually able to do it. As a result, like, this is never terrible. It's always at least like an Iron for Grizzly, right? Which is bad, but like, at least it does something. And sometimes it's gonna win you a game against a hunter or something. With that, we move on. Next up, we have Jazz at base. 3 mana 2/2 weapon with Death Rattle. Your next spell costs 1 less. Overload while equipped to improve. So this is interesting. The thing that's funny is that overloading is going to require you to... it kind of competes with itself. Like, okay, you overload, so then if you overload immediately, you get this discount, but then you're also overloaded, so you can't do it. That makes it seem a little bit weird, right? But it's like, okay, great, I have this big spell, but I still can't play it because I'm overloaded. And then it's just it's a little bit funny. I guess you will still be able to ramp it and play it later. So it's just a little bit weird. Like, you're not really... That seems like your ability to actually cheat anything out with this isn't really relevant. Okay, you might get some mana cheat. It's a 2/2 weapon, effectively for 2. It's fine, right? Yeah, at its base form, it's still not that bad, and I guess it's kind of good tempo if you do have a lot of synergy, but realistically, you probably just won't expect that much to it, so it just makes it kind of okay, I guess. Still not terrible, right? But probably just realistically aren't going to have that much synergy and expect to do all that much really out of this, I don't think. Because I kind of agree with that. I think Overload just... We'll see how it works in Constructed, but it's like, the thing is like, I just always don't like picking Overload cards typically. But again, like, there will be some that you're going to want to take in this expansion, so we'll talk about those in a little bit. Next up, we have Brass Elemental. This is kind of an arena card. 4 mana, 3/3 Elemental with Rush, Divine Shield, Taunt, and Wind Fury. So, I mean, there would be 2 main ways you're going to use this. You can use this like a multi-shot that kind of that might even value trade something. Very efficient. It's always like 6 damage. You can always use it for 6 damage unless there's not enough to actually swing it into. So it's very, very efficient there. Very solid card. But in addition to that, you can also, if your opponent doesn't have anything on board, you just play this, and then it's a Wind Fury. You might be able to buff it up. They are removing Rockbiter weapon, so you can't actually do that. But I mean, it does too much for 4 mana. Really, it's just a very solid card, nice reactive thing. It's just always good. There pretty much is no situation where this card isn't. It's very, very nice. I think it's a cool card. The one thing with Darkfall and Shadow that the one thing that might make this better than Darkfall and Shadow, maybe Darkfall and Shadow is still better, but you know, the one thing with Darkfall and Shadow is if your opponent doesn't have anything that's 3 attack, you don't get Wind Fury effectively, but this would still get Wind Fury, so it does add versatility. Darkfallen might be better just because it's cheaper, but I mean, they're both really good cards. They're both going to be cards you just always take. We will move on to Altered Chord. This is a 5 mana nature spell with a lifesteal. Deal 5 damage to a minion, cannot go face. Costs 3 less if you're overloaded. 5 mana, deal 5 with lifesteal. Okay, you get lifesteal, but I mean, you know, Death Strike is not that great of a card. Death Strike's the name of it, right? The 4 mana deal 6 lifesteal in Death Knight. That's not even an amazing card. This is way less efficient. So it's not really worth it. But if you're overloaded, this becomes 2 mana deal 5, which is suddenly very, very efficient, right? Still not like insane, but you know, Shaman likes healing. If you're playing control deck, you like it. If you're overloaded, you're probably fell behind because you played overload cards, let's be honest. So you're gonna be able to heal. So yeah, 2 mana deal 5 is great. It just has that weird condition, and you really need that condition because otherwise it's just not good enough. But assuming you can trigger it, nice card. If you can't trigger it, not nice. So overall, it's okay. Like, it's a little bit, again, synergy reliant. You're just not always going to have overloads, but you probably will. Because now we will, I believe we'll start talking about, this is another overload synergy card. Because this is a legendary, but this is Inza, or Ainza? I don't know how you pronounce that, but 5 mana 5/5 Battle Cry. For the rest of the game, your overload cards cost 1 less. You usually just don't have that many overload cards, so a 5 mana 5/5 at this point is pretty bad, frankly. And how much are you really going to cheat this? It's nice that it's for the rest of the game. So it's not like it only buffs your deck or only your hand or something. Like it buffs anything. Even if you discover it, it still works. So that's nice. But again, like just how much do you really expect to get out of this? I feel like you just have better options in the legendary slot. Not a terrible card, but just you'll usually have better options. And with that, we move on to finally the big overload cards here. First off is JIVE Insect. 5 mana fire spell. Transform a minion into Ragnaros, the Fire Lord. So this is again one of those cards that actually has overload. However, this is a legendary, so you won't be able to draft this very much. But, you know, Spell Discover will be a huge way that you'll actually access this. And probably most of the time you see this, it'll actually have been discovered or generated randomly by Sunwell, by some other class, let's be honest. But yeah, it's like the one thing is like if you have to totem, you'll probably use this on totem like a lot. And you are actually paying 9 mana for Rag, which makes it, to be honest, not that great at that point. But, you know, it's Ragnaros, it's value, it's, you know, it's still not terrible. Yeah, or Jackpot, that's also true. I guess that's true too. You could transform an enemy minion. I don't know what you would really want to transform, but you could transform an enemy minion if you wanted to. The one situation you would do it is if you actually wanted to. I guess you could transform it a taunt to get lethal. That's one thing. But also, if your opponent is going to kill you, you could turn your opponent's minion into Ragnaros so that it is not guaranteed to kill you if they had lethal on board. Maybe Ragnaros doesn't hit you in the face. So there are uses of this on an enemy. Yeah, a lot of the times you're just going to use this as a kind of overpriced Ragnaros, but it's Ragnaros. Ragnaros is a cool card, right? So. And the last card here, by far the most powerful card in this set for Shaman we have here is Pack the House. 7 mana, Overload 2. So 9 total mana, but summon a random 6, 5, 4, and 3 cost minion. You add those numbers up, and that is 18 mana for the low price of 7 on the turn you played. So, I mean, this is like probably not quite as efficient as Scourge, but it comes down 2 turns earlier, and this is a common for some ungodly reason. Yeah, like why is this a common? I would... Why? I imagine this won't be a common for long, because this is probably one of those things they're going to turn into an epic rarity or something. I have to imagine, right? Because, I mean, this is like... Yeah, okay, you can low roll, but I mean, let's just pretend like the 6-drop doesn't exist. It's still insanely efficient, right? Like, yeah, yeah, it's insanely powerful. But let me know what you think about this card in the comment section below. Thanks a lot for hanging out here on YouTube, but also everyone hanging out on Twitch as well. Like, subscribe, comment, all these things. All right, bye-bye.